So hold on, I'll check Elizabeth. Just
I've got it.
accept that. All right, Elizabeth Williamson. So Elizabeth is conflict resolution expert based in Adelaide. She's got a lot of techniques. You've been doing this for what, 20 or 30 years, I think, Elizabeth, now. Not that she looks like, obviously, she looks like a child herself. But I'm going to hand over to Elizabeth to talk a bit about what it is that she's going to talk about. She'll do her little presentation and then we can all natter. So off you go.
Great, thanks, Jules. And look, Jules is a great friend of mine, and she's the boss learning tables, and the whole She's the Boss group I just want to acknowledge how much support you're giving to female founders and that sense of confidence that we get from working with your promotion and goodwill and enthusiasm. So, I think it's great that we're all here. I'm very passionate about women learning to lead relationships. And so I'm going to talk a bit about that. But a bit about me and why I do what I do is that I used to be terrible at conflict. Like, I was always in a conflict. And if you listen to the podcast, you'll hear a bit about my early years in my family. With a father who had some problems and some tragedy that was not managed well, and the story of why I'm here. So my background is in social work. I last century. Late last century, I graduated as a social worker, and I was going to be involved in political work. So I was going to be a community development officer, empowering people. And one of the first jobs I had was working with a group of women who wanted to set up a community centre. And I stepped into my first conflict because they had conflict within the committee. You've ever been on a committee in a community? Arguments. And then they had, so that was interesting, my naivety. And then they had conflicts at home because this was all mid-80s. And so when they went home and they weren't cooking tea, their husbands were getting cranky. So as these women were getting more involved in the community, the conflict switched to home. And then I went off to the Franklin Dams conflict. And so I stepped into a political realm, and then I came back. And in the course of my career, I've worked with Vietnam veterans. I've worked with, I ran a domestic violence service. I've been at the forefront of physical violence and coercive control. And I've worked in the women's sector, which also can be full of conflict. I've worked in private counselling services, so coaching people who are dealing with workplace conflicts, and that's where I sort of stepped in from, really what I love doing is helping people build good relationships, because it took me so much work to learn how to do that myself. So this is not a natural skill for me. I had to dive deep because I didn't get the grounding when I was young. And so I've worked very hard to learn what I've learned. And what I've done is gone to the master thinkers and the researchers and distilled some of the best knowledge that I can find and put that into a very simple 6-step model that you can use to gain confidence with conflict. And so the thing I really want to sort of centre this about is that conflict is about predicting what will work well. And confidence is the skill that sits behind that. When we have positive confidence, we predict with reasonable certainty, I'm going to show this in my slide thing, what works well to drive a conversation or a situation or a resolution in the direction that we want. What we tend to do in conflict is we do what doesn't work. We have negative confidence. When I'm coaching people, what I generally hear is that people predict what won't work. It's very hard to have a conversation people want in a conflict because they will tell me what they don't want. Now, if I tell the taxi driver I don't want to go to, I don't know, Glenelg or St Kilda, I'm not going to go very far. So learning to understand that when you predict failure, you're not working in your interest. That's what most of us do in conflict, can help you shift what you're doing. And so along that career arc, I've worked in coaching large organisations, customer service, managers. I come in and do consulting. So I come into organisations where there is a disrupted team to analyse what's going on and make recommendations. So I'm your girl. I'm also a couples therapist and a family therapist and an accredited mediator. So my life is arguments. The arguments you have with yourself on a bad day, the arguments you have at home, the arguments you have at work, and the arguments you might have out in there in the community. And I'd like us all to learn to make a little more peace in every conversation we have. It's my byline. So I'm going to take you on a bit of a journey, and I'm going to start off, share my screen, make sure I've got exactly what I want up. This is what I want. So let's take you on a journey. And let's see, let's get that full. And let's get that there. Beautiful. So can everyone see that one? And Jules, I'm still getting people admitted in, so I'm just going to admit them as they come in because I think I've still got control over that. So let's.
Sorry, no, Elizabeth, I can do that as well. So just ignore.
All right, I'm going to take
those.
Get that screw out of the way. Here we go. All right, so I really want you to be resilient in conflict because it's an inevitable part of life, but we never know what to do with it. So here's a beautiful poem which you may have heard of by Portia Nelson, and it's a short story of how most people deal with conflict. Chapter 1. I walk down the street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I fall in. I'm lost. I'm helpless. Well, this isn't my fault, and it takes me forever to find a way out.
Otherwise, just press.
Chapter 2. And to see if this applies to you. I walk down the same street.
Now, there are 15 participants.
Got some feedback happening, I'm not sure. Karen Hall, I think you're it's mute.
I've just muted her.
Okay. So I walk down the same street. There is a deep hole in the sidewalk. I pretend I don't see it. I fall in again. I can't believe I'm in the same place, but it isn't my fault. And it still takes a long time to get out. Chapter 3. I walk down the same street.
Sorry, Elizabeth, just wait 1 minute. Karen, you've got 2 windows open and one of them's not on mute and we're hearing all about your phone calls. Are you able to cancel one of them? I'm trying to mute it and it won't let me.
Did you say me?
Karen Hall.
Ah.
No, sorry, not Karen. Karen Hall. Okay, I think that might be okay now.
Right, let's see.
Sorry.
Right, cool. So chapter 3. I walk down the same street. There is a deep hole in the sidewalk. I see it there, still fall in. It's a habit. My eyes are open and I know where I am. It is my fault. I get out immediately. Chapter 4. I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I walk around it. We've lost chapter 5. I'm not sure where it's gone. Chapter 5 is I walk down a different street. I don't know where that went. So really what we want to do is, I'm going to go back a bit. So this is called an autobiography in 5 short chapters, but one of the slides was missing. Anyway, There's a Hole in My Sidewalk, which is The Romance of Self-Discovery by Portia Nelson, who's a wonderful writer and poet. And this is actually used a lot in AA around addiction, but I think it's just as true in conflict because we are addicted to being right. And once we can stop that minor compulsion, everything changes. Because the reality is most of our communication is a little off-centre. It's not quite what we want. We haven't heard quite clearly. And so we are inevitably getting into conflict. And conflict is just drama. It's did anyone finish watching Succession the other night? If you're watching anything on TV, every book you read, every love song you hear, it's all about drama, and we love it. We really do. So if you're going into work and, life is pretty prickly, if you're caught in binary thinking, yes, no is the only way of solving the problem, right, wrong, good, bad, all of these drive conflict. perhaps, you're someone who gets caught up exploding or surrounded by someone else who does it. And, we feel entitled to let people exactly know how we're thinking and feeling, and yet it's not going to work predictably. Or maybe you're someone who bends over backwards to make other people happy. None of these things work well. So confidence, as I said before, it's a skill, not an emotion. And it's what I want you to think about underpinning your approach to conflict. So it's the skill, as I said before, of predicting with reasonable accuracy the outcome of your actions. I learned this years ago in a time management program, and I failed time management, but I took this one thing away and it changed my life. So we've got to get to looking at, as I said before, about positive and negative confidence, and we've got to have an evidence framework as we work through understanding what conflict is, rather than working with our emotions. And I want you to think about the concept of the story that drives every drama and every melodrama, and it's this pattern of villain, victim, and rescuer. And it's as old as time. It's the cornerstone of every drama and the cornerstone of every conflict story we tell. So trying to move things forward, I wanted to develop a program that would help people see what are the key steps you need to take to deal with conflict. So first of all, we've got to actually know the clues. We've got to see what is happening in this story and what are the stories that people are telling and that we're telling about what's going on, so we can accurately read what's going on. We need to be able to stay centered, manage our emotions and most particularly our heart rate, so that we can manage our thinking and manage our choices about behaviour. We also need to practice to be concise, because getting clarity in how you frame what you say will stop some inevitable problems. And it's also really important to understand that when we get defensive, we tend to overshare or over-explain, and that won't work well. And we also need to be understand when someone else is struggling to be concise, probably that's the same thing happening for them. So we need to be able to read what's happening for ourselves as well as other people. We need to be able to communicate clearly. And what that comes down to for a lot of people is what are the key issues? What are the key dreams? And what do I really want? Because as I said, most people will tell me what they don't want in a conflict situation. And we have a bit of a legacy, I think, as women, which is that we've been trained very strongly in our culture to ask permission. And so we have trouble in conflict asking for what we want. We want the other person to give us either permission to do that or to solve that problem for us. I see that pattern a lot. And we need to work out what we're going to do with resentment, because if you're committed to resentment, you don't have a future choice in a conflict. Or if you're committed to past pain or being wounded or being indignant or any of those emotional legacies, you can't think about a future choice. And you need to be able to lead relationships towards what do I want this to look like going forward, so I know what I need to do next. And we also, it's really important that we check in. Like, none of us can solve conflicts without support. I certainly cannot. So I have some people around me that I check in with and I talk through things with, just so I can get clarity, because I get caught up in my own story about the conflict. And I'm always the victim in my own story about a conflict. Rarely do I describe myself as the villain, the person who's, we move into fault finding. And often I'm the rescuer. So we really got to get clear about that. So having that support with someone or having a mentor, watching someone who does a really good job with relationships, all those things are really important. So let's go through the model. So know the clues. The first clue I gave you was about the story. And the second clue is that most of us approach conflict from a position of irrationality. So no matter how clear you think you're being, there'll be some emotion in there. The key thing about that is that we all have some beliefs that drive us towards behaviours that do not work in our interests, so they're negatively confident. So it might be that you feel like you have to make people happy. You know, you have to be the one that solves the problem. That people who are do things wrong should be punished. That you have to be liked and loved by everyone you meet. That acceptance and admiration is the way you gain your sense of self. All of the things are fairly irrational thoughts. So we need to be able to interrogate our thinking and work out what our mindset is when we come to conflict, because those irrational thoughts are going to drive what we do unconsciously. And they're things that we learn in our family, in our early relationships in school. So we need to be alert to ourselves, and we need to also understand that story of victim, villain, and rescuer. Where do you fall into that? Because that's a trap. The next clue in the story is how to stay centered. And staying centered means, how do I manage my emotional regulation? So we've got to stay calm in conflict. That's really important. But how do you do that? Well, your breath rate is the key, because your breath rate equals your heart rate, and your heart rate will manage your thought rate, which means you get choice of thought. Oh, I'm stuck in an irrational thought. This is my old habit I fall into. I'm wounded, they must be bad, or I should fix this, even though it's not my responsibility, or whatever it comes up for you. And that means you can make a choice about what you're going to focus on in your self-talk, or how quiet you can be in listening to someone. And that gives you the emotional stability to manage conflict. So one of the tricks you can all try right now is called 4-2 breathing. So I'd like everyone to put their feet on the ground and wriggle your toes in your shoes and take a big breath in and pause a little bit, and then take a big breath out and breathe right down through your body, down through your trunk, your thighs, your calves, and press your feet into them. And just feel the sort of floor that you've got underneath you. And now I want you to take a breath that's not too big, but full, and to the count of 4. So breathing in, 1, 2, 3, 4, and pause, 1, 2, and breathe out, 1, 2, 3, 4, and pause, 1, 2. And now breathing in again, 1, 2, 3, 4. As you pause, check in. How am I? Where am I tense? Where am I uncomfortable? Breathing out, and just let it go. 4, 1, 2. Breathing in again, 1, 2, 3, 4. Pause, check in again. What's happening in my body? Is my mind racing? Am I calm? And let that go, breathing in right down through your body again. 1, 2, 3, 4. And one more time, breathing in. Pause, check in, and breathe out, let it go. If you can manage a steady heart rate through a steady breath rate, you're going to be able to stay calm. But also what you can be able to do is notice when you start getting triggered. When it's harder to breathe in that steady rhythm, when your breathing is shallow, the clues are that you're touching emotional stuff and you need to self-regulate. Most importantly as well, you can notice other people. Are they getting flooded? Is this bringing up issues for them? What do I need to do to lead the situation so we can get back to calm? Or if it's not possible, take a break. No one can manage conflict when they are emotionally flooded. When your heart rate is above 100 beats per minute, but certainly by the time it's up to 90, all that happens is that we are triggered and we will not be able to manage what's going on. And I'll come to that in a minute. So the step 3 is about being concise. What's really important to understand is that the first 3 minutes in any conflict conversation will determine your outcome. You have that long to get it right. So how you start determines how you end. I'm just trying to get this. Sorry, did I mute myself then? Can you hear me?
Yes, you must have, because I wondered why you went. The first 3 minutes are really important, and then you went silent.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I'm just trying to slide something across the screen here. So the first 3 minutes are important. The first 3 minutes in any conflict conversation will determine the outcome. So start the conversation in the way that you want to end it. And there are some predictable things that will go wrong. So first of all, if you start abruptly, with a lot of emotion, harshly, with criticism, I can guarantee the other person will feel defensive. And defensiveness derails most conflict conversations. And defensiveness is a good clue to look for in yourself and in the other person. What we need to be the key we really don't understand about defensiveness is that it doesn't ever appear to the other person as you experience it. So when you are defensive, you feel you're being a little bit attacked, or you feel you've got to explain something, I can guarantee that if you stay in that mode, the other person will see you as angry, irritable, or attacking back, or self-aggrandizing, or using moral superiority, or something that makes them respond in exactly the same way, becoming defensive as well. The clue we need to have is if someone's being defensive, possibly have you done something that sounds slightly critical? Have you contributed to the problem rather than seeing their behaviour and criticising them? So we are, as I said before, if you start off harshly, abruptly, with too much emotion, or with a moral, well, I know what you were talking about, I haven't done that, I guarantee the other person will become defensive. Also, you need to watch your own defensiveness.
Elizabeth, can I just ask,
Yeah.
and I'm sure we'll talk about this later as well,
Yeah.
but will you give us some clues as to how to start a conversation if you don't start defensively? Because I think that that's something that I'm sure I'm not the only one that
Yeah,
it's so easy to do.
it is. I will give you some.
Okay,
I
great.
will give you. I just. So I want to know that. I want you to understand first of all being triggered. So I'll just go. Look, the key thing. I don't know if I've got to my slide deck or not. The key thing is start softly and start from I.
Right.
Because as soon as you say you, the other person's on guard. So starting with I, starting softly, starting without any fault or blame, is your best clue.
Okay.
To start well. And if the other person becomes defensive, you then need to go back, okay, their emotions are getting triggered, and I'm going to have to manage calmness in this conversation. How can I lead towards a calmer conversation? How can I pay attention to the other person so that I can help manage the environment to the best of my ability if they're not good at managing it themselves? And I got to manage myself. So it's a trick, because once someone becomes defensive, it's very easy for the heart rate to continue, because we tend to mirror. So if I get defensive, you'll get defensive. And then I'll be more defensive and you'll be more defensive. And then none of us will understand each other's communication. We'll misinterpret. And then we're going to start to feel like there's a whole lot of contempt in the conversation. And once contempt hits, I'm being judged. It's really easy just to go, I don't do this, I'm not listening, I'm out. And to the conversation is to hit a stone wall. Does that answer your question?
Yep.
Okay.
Thank
So
you.
being triggered is really important. We went back to that, in the beginning I said we're all a little bit irrational, but we can feel like we are so totally seeing what's going on without realising that what's actually happening is that old emotional stories in our lives are being triggered, and we're falling back to patterns either from our childhood or from a past workplace incident, or from past relationship, and we're really not in the present. We're dealing with old stuff. So you need to know where you're aiming your attention, if you like. And when you're triggered, sometimes you just have to take a pause and try and work out what's going on. The other thing I want to say about triggered is it's really important to learn about boundaries, because when you're triggered, you're probably going to feel a bit confused at where the boundaries are. And I'm happy to talk more about that as we go through, because I know that's a common conversation and a common concern, but you actually don't know what a boundary is until you step over it. And then you go, oh, I'm not sure what happened there. So this is why it's really good to have someone to check in with, to make sense of some of the clues. But if you know more about your triggers, you can take responsibility for them. And that's critical. Taking responsibility for your part in the conflict is what enables you to stop being defensive. Because maybe if someone else is being defensive, I've contributed to the problem, even if I don't like the behaviour. Or maybe they're triggered, I need to have more empathy in the situation so that I can manage what's going on. Communicating clearly is, look, I just want to actually go back to the concise thing, sorry. The trick about defensiveness in that when we're defensive, we tend to, here's the clue to look for. We will over-explain. So we'll start to tell a long story because we're trying to convince the other person that of our point of view, we're trying to persuade them. Doesn't work. We will try and, as I said, use a moral high ground. But we tend to get into a lot of verbiage. So when there's a lot of verbiage and you're not quite sure what it's all about, that's a clue about defensiveness. The other thing is we'll counterattack. So, you're worse than me, and a long story will come out. Or we whine and complain like we're the victim. So that, oh, you have no idea how hard it was for me. All these things happen. You should really understand. Which, of course, most people find irritating. Does that make sense? I hope it does, because those defensive clues are really important. But I'm just giving you a brief overview of my model. So I want you to see this beautiful, beautiful symbol for the first element of communicating clearly, which is ting. And it's down, I can't move.
Oh, no, hang on, you've made yourself mute again, Elizabeth.
Sorry, I'm trying to move. I don't know if you can see. I've got this thing on my screen.
You just said the symbol was ting, and then you just...
Yeah, ting. So ting is the Chinese character for to listen. And so it's made up of the symbol of a king. So you listen to the other person with the deepest respect, like they are royalty, with 10 eyes, 1 ear, and your heart. And this symbol down here is the heart, which I think is quite gorgeous, really. So the thing to understand is that ting, the sound of a bell, in a Chinese character, actually says everything we need to do, we listen. You gain so much more influence in a conflict when you listen first and get the other person's perspective. That is our first clue. You reduce defensiveness. You give yourself a time to get a whole lot more information. You create trust. And you do the one thing that most people don't do. You stop your self-talk to understand the other person. So we're all keen to put our point of view in a conflict. I can guarantee that's defensiveness. And we all stop listening about 3 minutes of someone's conversation. We start to work out what we want to say to rebut, to defend, or to counter. So listening is a really important skill. And the other key thing is you have to let someone know you're listening. So the most useful thing you can do is to summarise what you hear using as much of the person's words as possible, particularly emotional words, so that they understand that you've heard them. And then you check in. Have I got accurately what you were saying just then? So if someone's raising a complaint about a service that you're giving, and they're going, I think you're too expensive, and I think that I didn't get value for money, and you didn't follow up for 2 weeks on this, I don't see why I should pay the last bill. It can be really triggering, particularly if finances are a challenge at the moment. But if you say, oh, so I hear your complaint. So you're saying that you think my services are too expensive, that that there was some changes over the last couple of weeks, and you want to talk with me about whether you should be charged for the last 2 weeks. Is that right? That person comes down a bit. You haven't said what you're going to do, and you haven't said whether you think they're right or not. So tell me more about your complaint. Tell me more about why, what's the problem? What it does, it gives you a whole lot more information before you've given any clues away about where you are. And although it's uncomfortable, people really love it when we listen to their complaints. I mean, I'm sure you love it when someone listens to your complaints. I was stepping out of the gym today and I could see a bunch of women gathered on the corner, all happily complaining about something, and all the passion in their faces about some instructor that hadn't got it right. And they were just really engaged in the drama of whatever it was they were all complaining about. We love it. And when we listen and someone says, oh, I heard what you said, and did I get that right? We feel really appreciated. And that's a counter for contempt. So the counter for contempt is to listen and show appreciation for the other person's perspective. You don't have to agree. So, future choices. One of the big challenges we have in a conflict is that we are generally rooted in the past. We go back to all the past pains, all the past problems, and we really want to have all of these resolved without thinking about where we want to go from here. So we need to move, as I did in that last little scenario with it, I'm criticising your service, I'm criticising your fees, I'm criticising everything else, from criticism to complaint, because complaints are manageable and a demand becomes a suggestion. We need to be able to evaluate options so that we can go, oh, so you're thinking that the best option to solve the problem of what happened in the last couple of weeks is that you don't pay any fee. Is that correct? It's just an option. It's not maybe the thing we're not going to talk about. Or it might be you think the best solution is that person gets sacked. Well, how are we going to do that? That's an option that may not have any validity. Or the best option often in personal relationships, I'm just not going to talk to them anymore. Well, how does that really work? So because we've got to manage a relationship. If you're never going to see the person again, great, do what you like. But if you've got to manage the relationship, everything you do needs to be based on your future choices in that relationship. And therefore, some of the options or the demands, if they're going to have a difficulty in that relationship, then you can obviously talk about that. Well, I want to keep working with you. I really like the relationship that we've built. But that option, I think, will put some strain on our relationship. So we can come up with all sorts of things to manage the intensity of a criticism to a complaint to talking about what sort of solutions are possible. And the last point of the model is to check in. So we all need to have great support. First of all, we need to check in with ourselves. I showed you a little bit of that while you were just doing some breathing. So are you getting triggered? And if I can say calm enough, is the other person in front of me getting triggered? How can I find out more about that? We need to have great support. We need a confidant, someone who can get our perspective, who's been there before, who'll take us on the journey. I've learned so much from watching really talented people, as well as the research I've done. I used to deal with email complaints by starting off with issues or complaints I wanted to raise by email with "I'm disappointed," and it took one of my mentors, I think, about 2 years to get me to realise starting off with an emotional comment was not going to give me the leverage I wanted. So when I now write things, I write them in draft so that I can take all of the emotion out, because it's usually there in the first draft, and I want to be concise, so I generally cut it back by 2/3, and I keep it salient, and I keep very clear about what I want. So I want the person to read and to act. I want my next steps to be really, really clear. So have great support. Find someone who can, with objectivity, help you see where your irrationality is, who can help you talk through the clues that you're getting in this situation so you can better understand who's playing out that game of villain, victim, rescuer, and are you being pushed in one direction yourself, and where are they in that triangular story? Because everyone plays a place in that game, and it's a pretty stuck game. Make sure that you when you work on those triggers, you've got a way of staying calm. And you can talk through when you weren't calm, you know, what happened? Because we mainly make mistakes when we communicate. And so repairing when you get a bit agitated or you start becoming critical, taking responsibility is really important so that you can stay concise and on point, not get derailed by red herrings or side issues, and not get lost in over talking or over explaining something because your emotions are carrying you away. You're starting to get defensive. Someone else is starting to get defensive, and you can see that this is going to derail. You can always ask if someone's getting defensive. Oh, I can see this is uncomfortable for you. Has something come up that you're uncomfortable that I've said? You can always go back. It's a lot of power to go, yeah, I might have made a mistake there, and still not move from your position of, but I'm taking this in the right direction. Most of us are very reluctant to admit error because we're caught up in right-wrong thinking, but admitting an error gives you actually leverage. You don't have to be guilty. You don't have to over-apologise. You just might acknowledge that, yep, there is something I need to do. So that's my model. In summary, what we've talked about is we need to see the different stories that people are talking about in their own minds, or the conversations they have with other people about the story of this conflict. Because conflict is drama, and we love drama. And we usually are at the centre of our story. We know everything that's happened from our perspective. We've shared that, you know, we've thought about it, it's woken us up at 2 o'clock in the morning, but we may not be able to see the other person's perspective. And so the ability to see and think flexibly about what is everyone's story in this changes everything. It gives you power, it gives you perspective, and it will increase your confidence. We need to manage our emotions, and we need to be able to manage the emotions of others by having strategies that calm, by noticing ourselves, and we can manage emotions in communication when someone's agitated by taking the conversation down a tone to talk more about that in our discussion. But when we see someone getting emotionally dysregulated, we need to be able to measure whether it's appropriate to keep going or whether we should pause and give 20 or 30 minutes to calm down to re-engage. Because when someone's flooded at 100 heartbeats a minute, they will just be in fight, flight, freeze, and they will not hear anything accurately. They'll take it all as threatening. Be back getting triggered. We need to be able to be concise in our energy as much as in our communication. So be able to do less and be more present. And so that's why conciseness is really important, because when someone is... do you hear? Because
I can run mute.
when someone is a high conflict individual, someone that's 10% of our population who solve problems with conflict, they will drag you into the vortex of their emotional turmoil and you'll be exhausted. So being able to manage your energy or the energy involved in conflict is really, really important. So be more and do less. And that's where that listening is really important, because then you can stick to fact. You're not getting sidelined by red herrings, by, you know, kitchen sink issues, because you're sticking to the focus of what needs to be addressed here. You'll be future focused in what you're doing, so you know the direction you're going in, and have great support. And I'll talk through now. Obviously, this is a more complex model. I just want to give you some tips about each of those 6 steps. And these are the skills that you need to have, these 6 skills, so that you can manage conflict with more confidence and more success. I'm going to end the show here and stop the share and come back into the conversation. So that 6-step model is really just distilling those key issues, and it works whether it's a personal relationship, a workplace relationship, or a community environment.
Wow. Elizabeth, that was great. Boy, oh boy, have I got to do a lot of learning to try and lower my, I'm just thinking about my conversations with my sons.
Yeah, our children are great teachers about conflict skills, and I'll share, I've learned a lot from my son because he's very different from me, and we had an immense amount of conflict. And at one stage, a few years back, I went, Elizabeth, you teach this stuff. Why are you getting so upset? And I blamed him for everything. I had a story. My story was, I'm a great mother and he's just terrible. And then I went, okay, I teach this. I should do this. Anyway, for 2 months, I thought, I wonder how he sees this. I wonder how he sees our relationship. And I realised that from his point of view, he saw it exactly as I saw it, except he could see what I was doing. So I realised from his perspective, I was very critical. I was incredibly judgmental. That he had a story, accurate or not, that I only invited him around when I wanted him to do something. Now, it probably wasn't accurate, but it was maybe a legacy story. But it's what it told me was he didn't feel valued, and he didn't come in relaxed. His time in a family is really minimal. He doesn't want to come and have a cup of tea and chat, and he's a very focused person. So I didn't have to be wounded by the fact that he didn't want to spend that much time, and he likes giving advice. He's quite a successful person, but I kept seeing him as this young thing, and I wanted to be the advice giver. Anyway, I just kept seeing his perspective. I went, okay, every time you come here, I'm going to only give you compliments and appreciation. When you leave, I'm going to give you a token, whether it's food or something. It's a bit mumsy, but also that I really appreciate that you were here. You can leave whenever you want. I'm not going to have an opinion about it anymore. And I'm going to listen because you really do like to share what you know. And you may not be interested in what I know. Damn it. Anyway, it's changed everything. It's changed everything. It took a few years, took 2 or 3 years, but we have the best relationship. Oh, and then we still have flare-ups. Okay, I am triggered by my childhood. That's what I'm doing with my son. Very little doing. It's me and my dad still.
Right. Okay.
So, you can do all the therapy in the world, therapist, and still be doing it till the day goes.
Cool. Okay. So firstly, I want to say a huge thank you, Elizabeth. But also, we've got more time now. So does anyone have an issue that they would like some advice as to how to manage? I thought it might be Leanna. Let's get Leanna going first. But if any of you want some tips or advice about something specific, you don't have to name names, but if you want to tell us what the situation is, and I'm sure Elizabeth will have advice, but handing over to Leanna first.
Can I just say at the beginning, hold on, can we have a confidential agreement that what happens in this learning table stays in this learning table?
Hang on a minute. No, you're not going to be able to unless I turn off the recording, and I'd really love it if
okay.
That we just
raise your problem in third person, or don't use any names.
Yeah,
or right. Give them other names.
That would be the ideal, because I think it does.
We can manage that then. I'll manage it too for you.
Okay, cool. Go, Leanna.
Leanna, how can I help you?
Hi. Thanks for that, Elizabeth. I think I'm somebody, in your triangle, villain, victim, rescuer, I think I'm somebody that always sees myself as the rescuer, and I think I can fix any situation. So I think I want to understand just a bit more about what a rescuer means in that triangle situation.
So in that triangle, if you think about it, when we're stressed, right, we are in fight, flight, and freeze mode. We've all heard of that stress response, right? Everyone's familiar with that. So fight is anger. And anger is a really, really important emotion. Anger is a movement towards a problem. I'm not about rage, it's about anger. It's a movement towards a problem. So, you know, if you're out in the bush and you see a dingo, you pick up a stone and you throw it, right? Because you did something towards, you need some anger to do that, right? Fear is moving away from a problem. So fear, you're out in the bush, oh my God, there's 3 dingoes. Well, I'm not going to, you know, I'm running. Okay? Does that make sense? Yeah. And rescue is hiding. And what we do is we drift away a little bit. But what actually happens with our behaviour is we tend to become over-responsible or under-responsible for the problem. So when you rescue, you tend to go, I have to fix this. I'm the one responsible. Or somebody else should fix this. I'm not responsible. But what it does is and I can tell you, if you do that, eventually you'll get angry because it didn't work. So there you are. Someone's the persecutor, they're doing this to me, right? Or you'll get the victim. Oh my God, I did all this and no one appreciated it. Yeah? So once you're in that triangle, you do all 3 components. You may prefer one, you may recognise one, but I can guarantee someone else watching that environment will see you at another point. They'll see you as the persecutor, they'll see you as the victim. Right? So that's what's such a trap. But it is actually our fundamental way of looking at conflict that we've instilled in our culture. It doesn't work. So the antidote to rescuing is to go, hold on, what am I responsible for? And whose responsibility am I taking over? I need to give back. And how will I deal with my feeling of discomfort in not rescuing? So we rescue to make ourselves feel better. And we probably learnt it, right? Women are taught to rescue. It's a big thing. And men are taught to sit there and wait for something to happen for them in the myth of life, you know, and it's not what everybody does, but, you know, there's a gender bias. We need to not take responsibility for everyone's emotions. But most importantly, handle our own discomfort when someone else is upset, struggling with a problem, can't find a solution. You do not have to solve that problem. The other thing about that's a good antidote for rescuing is to work out, well, how much do I need to do? Because 10% of a solution can create immense change. So you don't have to do 90%, and you certainly shouldn't be. And you should never be stepping over 50%, because then you're in someone else's space. Remember, it's a boundary. So the boundary is, you know where your boundaries are when you've stepped over. So if you're doing 60% and taking more responsibility for a problem or an issue than the person who is responsible should, you need to manage your boundaries and come back. Go, hold on, where is the limit? And it's uncomfortable because we want to. The old patterning, we want to break the boundary, and it doesn't work. All sorts of problems come from that. And I guarantee, predictably, is a negative confidence. I can predict the outcome, that action will lead in a direction you do not want to go in. Is that helpful?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Has anybody else got any questions that they would like to run past Elizabeth? One that I thought that I get constantly from my kids and from other people, and I don't really know how to stop it, is that I automatically go into solution mode. So, and people go, I'm not asking you for how to do it or how to solve it, I just want to talk. But that is I find it really hard to discuss an issue without coming up with a solution to it.
Yeah.
And it seems to just escalate the whole problem sometimes. Have you got any feedback
I've noticed
about that?
About you, Jules.
Oh, not you too.
Oh, it's okay. Look, it's okay. I told you I was defensive, but I'll come back to it. So listening is a big skill. And Karen's got a hand up. Are you?
Yeah, I was just going to say, Jules, I do the same with my kids in particular. And my daughter says, sometimes she says to me, Mum, when I tell you something, if you're not sure what to do, just ask me. Ask me if you just want me to, if I just want you to listen or if I want you to solve the problem. And it's something that I guess you've got to get into the habit of going, even just checking in and saying, okay, it sounds like you've got a problem here. Do you want me to listen? Do you want me to solve it? What would you like me to do? How can I help?
Yeah.
I don't do it, but I should be doing it.
Yes.
So here's a clue. So the skill is listening, right? The skill is listening. 10. So stop your self-chatter. It's rescuing. It's another form of rescuing. Oh, well, clearly I have the solution here, right? I don't want to be uncomfortable with your problem. I just want to solve it so I can move on. That's often what we're doing when we give advice giving quickly. I'm uncomfortable with your distress or your problem. I just want to tell you what it is. So I'm impatient because I want to move on because I know what the solution is. Right? High D. In the DISC personality, that's high D, if you're familiar with DISC at all. And so, you know, I just want to get the process happening. I want to get the decision made. And okay, now let's move on. But, you know, that's about staying with the problem from the other person's perspective, because they will not see it as you see it, and your solution may be irrelevant. So there's a thing called emotion coaching. Emotion coaching is particularly relevant for families, but you find it works in business as well, where you're helping unpack what's going on. If you think about our emotions, what you see at the top is like an iceberg, so you see the tip of an iceberg, and that's what you see. But underneath, so you might see someone irritable, right? And you go, oh my God, they're irritable. Why are they snapping at me? Well, you should be, you know, you should do that differently. So here we go, criticism. First step, right? First critical problem. You should do it differently. Criticism, right? So then what happens then is that we start to solve that problem. But who knows what's going on? You don't know the story. They might be frustrated. They might be feeling uncomfortable about something. They might have a longing. There might be some fear in there. It might be that they're preoccupied by something else and you intruded into their space or their thoughts. Who knows? So if you do not listen, you've got no information, you've got no clues. You're just going on, oh, well, I know what's going on. So I often talk about being a thought detective. You really do have to go, well, what's the evidence here? And disprove yourself. Be scientific. So if you think you know what's going on, that's option 1. Can you generate 5 options? Because that's where creative thought comes in. So when I'm coaching people, one of the things I get people to do is to think of 5 possible options. And I can tell you the first one is something that most people don't want. Oh, I don't want that solution, or I don't want that to be the situation. Right? But I'm stuck there. That's what I do all the time. Or the second one is usually a fanciful thing. Well, the perfect outcome would be this. It's unlikely to happen like that. The third one will be, well, it's a compromise I don't really want. Man, there's no creativity in any of that thinking. The fourth one, so I'm going to keep going. Oh, the fourth one, oh, okay, well, maybe, you know, we push ourselves for an outcome, a future choice that might be a bit more related to the people involved in the problem. The fifth one is probably interesting. But we're so locked in with our thinking in conflict that it's very hard to be creative. So, you know, why I'm excited about conflict is its creativity. It's really exciting to go, I'm going to have to learn something here and I don't want to do it. Here's the hole. Here's the hole I step in every time. Oh, I don't want this problem. Do I have to do this? And I have to be thankful for it. Like, this is useful. This shouldn't exist. No, it should. It is. And you'll grow and you could create something marvellous if you were creative and not defensive or attacking. So for me, you know, it's where we bring our creative humanity in. I'm not an artist, just an argumenter.
Fantastic. Now, there's a question here from Kerry, whose mic doesn't work, and I love it. So that's why I'm definitely, and just keep a little eye on that, because somebody's going to, one of the She's the Boss members is nearby. So I'm just going to have to go to the door in a minute. Kerry says her question is around body language, and I love it because I hear it, I get it because of my voice. But sometimes people find her intimidating, which is not her intention, and it's just the way she's standing or her body language. And I get it from my voice when I'm not meaning to be, you know, sound authoritative or aggressive, but it just comes out that way. What can we do to help in those sorts of situations?
Yeah. Okay, so there's a whole lot of stuff you can do, Kerry, around body language. First of all, open body language is the best, obviously. But look, our words are 10% of our communication, and most of our communication is non-verbal. So tone of voice. So if you soften your voice and you speak slower. It's much calmer. And if you, so if you soften and slow, that's going to reduce tension. The next thing is watch your jaw. Because a lot of people, they say really nice things, but they look like this. Or eyes. So just be aware of relaxing your face. But this is where you know your triggers. Because if you know that you tend to grimace, right? Or you've got bitchy resting face, then you need to be able to manage that. Okay. So because bitchy resting face looks defensive and it looks like, you know, you don't like that, you disagree. Eye contact, if culturally appropriate, is a good thing. So to keep eye contact, lower your voice, slow your speech down, take a pause between things you say because you want to stay concise. Open-handed gestures, watch for clenched fists. So there's all sorts of things you can do. Shoulders back and breathe. And if you're breathing slowly, you can get that 4-2 rhythm going, guarantee your body posture will change. There's a boundary exercise I do also in my workshops around managing your personal space so that you can set limits with minimal energy. This is part of concise work. And it's hard to show you in a Zoom, but you can set a boundary so that you don't have to be defensive with minimal energy if you can manage your physicality. Because when you are angry, and anger, remember, is a good emotion, and so you want to get in and solve the problem, right? Because you're direct. That's anger. You have to manage it, because if that's your tendency, that's going to derail you. And I don't know if that fits for you, but, you know, if you're seen as authoritative, you are not listening enough and you're not checking in. Kerry's got a hand up, Jules.
You are.
Did I answer the question? Yeah. The other thing about authoritative is, where's your empathy? So if its authority is power over, but I don't want power. That's our old paradigm for conflict. We want to be influential. And influence first comes from listening and elevating the other person. You have so much more influence when you elevate the other person. So it's hard because we don't want to do that. What we want to do is give our point of view. And we have to learn. We don't have to learn, sorry. There's an opportunity to learn to do it differently if you want success. No, I've got this from Kerry. I'm very happy.
Oh, good. Oh, am I on?
Any business-related problems? Any relationships that are challenging in your business life or negotiations that you need to sort of anticipate, resolve?
Yeah. Does anyone have
handle differently?
Burning question, as you have an expert here in the room?
Nikki's got a hand up.
Who has? Great.
I do, actually. I've just come off a call. I've just come off a call and I wanted to come in here so urgently. With respect to investors, that's something that I've always had a burning sort of thought about. How when investors start asking questions and so forth, what do you suggest in respect to, and I apologise because I'm only just hopping in now, but, with respect to just how I compose myself?
Depends what the question is, but so you missed the beginning where I said that one of the way you get, so I'm not into power over, right? Because what a lot of investors might be trying to do, I've got the power here, you want my money, I'm going to play a game, but you want to have influence. So there's a skill in listening and then repeating back what you hear. It's called a Rappaport intervention. It's based on Anatole Rappaport, who was a game theorist, and he developed a thing called the prisoner's dilemma, which is a famous game if you're into gaming, not if you're into linguistics and stuff. you might know about. Anyway, so the idea is that you gain influence when you listen and repeat back what the person says to clarify if I've understood. And you use their words, because our words are our precious jewels.
Yeah.
And then you gain a lot more information before you declared anything. So you don't answer the question. You go, so let me clarify. So what you're saying is, okay, can you tell me more about that? And what is in particular of concern? So you're not interrogating. It's very gentle. It's not an interrogation, because that doesn't work. It's a gentle, purposeful conversation where you declare very little until you have enough information. Go, okay, and then you summarise. So the skill is that to validate. Oh, so based on what we talked about, so this, and this are your priorities, and your concerns are this, and this is the outcome that you were considering. Have I got that correct? Well, it makes sense to me that you. So then you validate. It makes sense to me. These will be your concerns. Now, you might have spent 10 minutes in that conversation. You've now got a lot of information, and you can decide what you'll share. Look, can I get back to you on that? Or, look, I think I can resolve the first two of those, but I'd like to be, like, by time, or you can resolve a problem. Does that answer your question?
It does, yeah, it helps, because there's ways, you know, you don't want to give away too much sometimes when you're presenting. So sometimes I'll ask you questions and you don't really know the answer to, or you could see that sort of hierarchy thing going on that, you know, yeah. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
And particularly, you know, with men who, you know, just want an answer.
Yeah.
You know, I want to use intimidation, want to use their, you know, they're going to say something like they're going to mansplain something to you, and I love repeating back mansplain.
I love saying that to men. Now, if it's okay with everyone, what I'm going to do is stop the recording now, and then if people want to have ask a question, Christine Williams says you're looking great, which you are.
Oh, thank you. That's the robotic balance challenge.
I will stop the recording. Let me just quickly, before we do that, just so you have a little sign off on the video, do you want to tell people how they can get in touch with you? Or
So you can get in contact with me through my website, Elizabeth Williamson Solutions. My email, should put it in the chat, really, shouldn't I?
No, Elizabeth, finish doing it as a video. You just said.
Okay, so you can contact me. I have you can book a free, it'll give you a 15-minute conversation, but we usually extend it to the need that you have. And
can you just do the web address though? You just said
so the web address is Elizabeth Williamson Solutions.
.com. Oh, well, you see now.
.com. Sorry, Elizabeth Williamson Solutions.com. Sorry.
All right, cool. And then you're also on LinkedIn, and
I'm on LinkedIn, on Facebook. I do tweet every once a year. And I'm on Instagram.
All right.
And I have a free ebook on my website,
which is dealing with.
Which you're all welcome to get before it becomes purchase. So you can download it, but I will be printing some more, and that's why I know back to front. It's called Dealing with Difficult Demanding People. It takes that 6-step model that I've talked through and helps you work through when you've got someone who's high conflict, someone who uses conflict to solve problems. So that might be someone who's intimidating and aggressive, or who gets very emotionally flooded and, you know, is a drama king or queen, or it might be someone who white ants or disrupts or likes to set the cat amongst the pigeons.
Okay.
But would not say that that's what they do. So that's 10% of our population. And you need a very different approach for those people.
Thank you so much. Okay, I'm going to stop the recording